Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the Transformational Learning Summit.
Hi, Lawrence. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation, also because we've had so many rich conversations in the past, and I'm excited to actually record one of these conversations to see what emerges. I like to start these sessions with an inquiry into the meaning of transformation. I feel like this is a word that so many people have a different relationship to, and I wonder, what is your definition or relationship to transformation?
Transformation is such a big word, so to say. I don't want to make too many words around it, but if you ask me about the essence, it's probably around the word relationship that you already mentioned. For me, transformation means change of relational patterns. And I like to emphasize the word patterns because often transformation is confused with change, so to say. But for me, transformation is change, but a change that doesn't pursue a predefined goal, but it focuses on a change of relational patterns. And then a new pathway emerges from that, so to say. I'm quite influenced both by psychological, but also by systems theoretical influences, and they both gravitate to an awareness of relational context and what are the patterns, meaning like the color of the relationships that I'm embedded in, so to say. And change just be a continuation of that color, but transformation for me is a change of that color. When I see the very nature of the relatedness that I'm embedded in is part of the change. And it's not just a surface change, so to say, where I preserve the pattern of relationships. That, for me, is the heart of transformation. And and the second layer to it is, for me, that is always a collision of, you could say, the worldly relationships that I'm part of and the spiritual and mental patterns that I embody in my own being. I feel they are very connected. So transformation as a term for me invites to reflect and engage in the connection of both dimensions of relational patterns that I'm part of. The ones that I embody, own being and my mental conditionings, but also in the way how my behavior patterns, my worldly relationships are manifesting the same pattern that I embody inside.
I love that definition, the way it conveys an appreciation or a certain implicit complexity. So other definitions of transformation I've heard is basically along the lines of when new action becomes possible. And I like that definition as well, but in its simplicity, this idea of an action as a singular, discrete behavior, I feel like a little bit doesn't necessarily capture the pattern-like nature of our behavior, and so I really love the your definition is unique out of the ones I've heard, because it really captures that. Yeah, I really can't think of a better way to say it. That it is a relational pattern that's there in your response, that isn't necessarily always the same, but it has a certain pattern-like nature to it. And it's the change of that. It is that there is a certain transformation there in the actual pattern, in a relational context, that that is actually what this kind of points out or conveys the nature of this process.
You see, now that you reflect that back to me, thanks for that echo, so to say. It stimulates something to me that I didn't mention before. Somehow, when you speak, I realize again that transformation can be seemingly very small when it's at this level of patterns, so to say. And I feel a certain joy about experiencing transformation at levels that from the outside may seem very small, but express such a radical change of the nature of relationality. transformation doesn't have to be the big thing, so to say. It can manifest from that origin, so to say, as something that is also visible as something big on the outside, so to say. But it's not necessarily the nature of transformation that has anything to do with size.
It's interesting you say that. What it brings to mind, and honestly, it's kind of a profound insight in this very moment. So I feel like there's stages to a person's transformational journey, and often, at least in my journey, at the earlier stages of obviously there's just the general transformation of progressing from child to teenager to adult, and that's its own kind of transformational process, and then there is, you could say, some kind of I'd say like the opening of awareness in some way. And I found that in the earlier stages of that process for me, the transformations were usually like big epiphanies, like, like just some sort of like really noticeable, and usually in some retreat or a ceremony or some kind of big event. And then there's a process of wanting more of that. It's like I want more of the big stuff, right? And then after a certain while, it kind of, at least for me, it gets more and more subtle. And in my personal journey, for like in the earlier days of when that subtlety began occurring, it's like, okay, it's subtle. And so, but now as I look at it in this moment, that progression of the transformational process to increasing subtlety is the biggest transformation of all. And it does get to like a really simple place, when you're just working with the subtlety of awareness and subject object relationship. It lands in the territory of subtlety.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's something very small and subtle about that,
Mm-hmm.
but really big
Mm-hmm.
at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I I feel a certain provocative joy sometimes when I work with people who are concerned with very big challenges, and they are all very eager to kind of find the breakthrough through this big challenge, and they believe they need a big change for something. I sometimes call it like shrinking into one's responsibility, um, because I find something very transformative in acknowledging that the actual relationships in which I am embedded so that it can be part of transformation, they might be very limited. They being worried about something that is quite far from me, that I am not in an effective relationship with, so to say, can make it very difficult to really live transformation. And maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but the things that I often feel confronted with, they are seemingly so big, sometimes global in their nature, etc. And at the same time, for me, transformation really invites us to let go of the aspiration to kind of make change here, but shrink into where I'm really related. And then suddenly feel, oh, if I live that pattern here, it's because I'm connected, it becomes part of something. But it's not a change at that level that I'm actually concerned about. And for many people, I feel that that's kind of a provocation, yeah, but it has something very, very alive, I would say, to allow itself to shrink into the actual reality.
But there's also something about the grounding of that, because that, whatever that big thing might be, often it can be a catalyst or an inspiration or certainly an aspiration. And then there's the question, and there's a certain, I hate to say it this way, but in some ways it's true. It's the comfort of absence out there in the, because you're not rooted in the reality of the discomfort of what you might have to be responsible for, responsive with, on the micro reality level. So there's a certain discomfort of being at that aspirational, not discomfort, a certain comfort of being at that aspirational level. And it certainly offers the inspiration, but the actual like ground of response
Mm-hmm.
really occurs in that micro territory.
I'm curious, why did you say you hate to say it that way? I found it very much to the spot, this comfort of distance, so to say. Or how did
It
you
is a
say?
comfort, right? It's a phenomenon I observe, and I don't just say that about, oh, look at them. I feel like it's a journey that I've lived of having, communicated from that space, and then in really through an observation of, because it's interesting also, we're going in all sorts of territories here, directions here, but I think it's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Much of this work also revolves around being able to invite people to have a relationship or be in relationship with you in this aspiration to transform the world. And where I found challenge in the earlier days of trying to communicate, feeling really inspired, having had a big transformational experience and feeling really inspired, and but communicating from this higher level, is that it didn't resonate with people. There wasn't that relatedness there that allowed me to really connect with people the way that I wanted to, and I could feel that. So it's kind of like people like, oh, but not really with me, and so that of course is a painful place to be in. But it's also, that pain is just a form of information. Is like, oh, something, I know I'm talking about something that's important. I know it's really relevant, but for some reason it's not landing for people. And so part of my journey was kind of like a progressive, iterative inquiry into that to land into this territory that we're talking about, which is
Mm-hmm.
really that the territory of relatability is in the, like, what is really available and present to me right now. And if I'm in a relationship with that and I can communicate from that
Mm-hmm.
place, then I'm much more likely to land with another person and touch something that's present for them as a lived experience right now. And that is a different
Mm-hmm.
space of communication.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. Yeah. And as you say that, I feel how that also invites me to land more in the here and now with you as
Mm,
the relationship in this very moment, so to say,
mm, mm.
if
So
you do it.
part of your um, role right now is
Mm-hmm.
this leading a transdisciplinary research group called Transformative Spaces and Mindsets. And I'm really curious to understand a little more of, and first of all, it's like one of the coolest sounding job descriptions ever. Uh, so I'm curious exactly what that means.
What that means. So I'm finding out every day a little bit more about what it means. um, no, I'll share gladly a few sentences about it. And I think I need to connect it to the place that I'm working with. So I'm part of a research institute that I've joined 12 years ago. It used to be called the Institute for Transformative Sustainability Studies. And now it's just called the Research Institute for Sustainability. So its journey is about helping society to move towards more sustainable modes of civilization, so to say. And I came here after my PhD in physics, basically out of my concern about what I perceive is going on in the world around me. And then I came to this place, and all sorts of seemingly influential people come together to have strategic dialogues, etc. And I just experienced how much of that is just running in circles. It's just information passed around, but it didn't feel alive to me. It didn't feel, what you said before, grounded to me. And you could say for the last 11 years, I've just been living with the question, how can I best support the people that I'm working with in making the tremendous capacities that this institute has and is connected with transformative, so that they actually catalyze change in a meaningful way. And often I don't know what that means, yeah, but it guided me very quickly to, on the one hand, facilitation, like how do I just help these people connect more meaningfully, like listen to each other and have conversations where something creative can happen. And the second dimension very soon was I was stunned that the human being somehow seemed to be excluded from the conversations that I witnessed around sustainability. Yeah. So I launched a project, a mindset for the Anthropocene, just inviting the question, what has all this transformation around sustainability to do with our own way of being human, with the way how our minds are constructed to look at the world, and how that is influencing the way how we conceptualize something like sustainability. I was just creating a space to invite that question. What about our own inner state of being? And I was surprised how people resonated with it, often just in one-on-one conversations, secretly, so to say, yeah, because they were worried to show up with it, because it's very risky in certain scientific or political circles to speak up for that. And the project was just a space for that, so to say. And now you ask me specifically about my job right now, you could say that experiment has just grown over time. And I have learned more and more what it needs to help these people make their capacities transformative, so to say. And it guided me towards trainings in facilitation and psychodynamic leadership, and always kind of sensing how can I respond to the needs of this place. And the current group, Transformative Spaces and Mindsets, is combining these two layers. It's like how to, you could say I'm a playground designer. How to design a playground, a space, in which the players can engage in a way that is transformative and includes the dimension of mindsets as an element of transformation. Because that needs a certain safety. We are not doing therapeutic work, so to say, but sometimes in a group process with people from industry and politics and whatever, at the end of the first day, some people in the closing circle say, this feels a little bit like group therapy. And it's not a therapeutic process. And at the same time, there are very rare occasions when people can feel safe enough to engage in a way that collectively you can also engage in reflection of your own mindsets. But I feel without that integration, transformation feels meaningless or just repetitive to me, so to say. And maybe I'm sensing that you have some words on your lips, but to add one part, no, come on, jump in here.
No. Add your part. I'm going to hold my tongue on this one.
Okay. I feel I need to say something about the word transdisciplinarity. Because on the one hand, we are an academic institution, but we are a learning experiment on how to integrate different perspectives in our work for transformation. And I love the origin of this place, that it was scientists who kind of gave the stimulus for this institute. It was a symposium of Nobel laureates who admitted we are society is full of wisdom that we don't integrate in the way how we make decisions in society. How can we design processes that really allow the diversity of perspectives that society holds to learn from each other, with each other, and empower each other for becoming effective? And that is what I hold most dearly to my heart, you could say. It's how can you enable people from very different cultures, from very different levels of influence or roles in society, to speak in a way that on the one hand they learn from each other, but in the end they leave the encounter with some more clarity. What can I do and what can you do, and what are you doing that I don't have to do, but it becomes something tangible and grounded. And that is for me transdisciplinarity. It is not research how academia has dominantly run for a couple of 100 years, but it is grounding research in actual problem solving for society. And it changes the whole way how you engage with different perspectives throughout the whole process that we are setting up here. So that's the framing in which I organize spaces for transformation that always include the reflection of mindsets throughout the whole process.
I really love this, and so there's two things that are present for me. One is I want to get more into how you approach the design of these spaces, but before we do
Mm-hmm.
so, where I, you shared something a moment ago about like a therapeutic space,
Mm.
and I've just it's such an interesting reflection for me because there's this question of like the distinction between what might be called therapy and what might be called some sort of collaborative space um, and I have a lot of reservations about that distinction and I'm always really careful to talk about this territory because there's for sure the domain of mental illness that or deep challenges that benefit from therapy. It's not at all a dismissal of therapy, but I do find that there's this interesting I think many things that we might call therapy can be provided in the context of humanity, presence, attunement. That if you're sharing
Mm-hmm.
something that's deeply challenging for you, and I
Yeah.
have the capacity to really be there in your pain and your suffering, and or if that comes up in the context of a scientific conversation, some element of your human experience, and I and become present to that and I can hold that. You could say, well, is there a space for this? That sounds more like therapy. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but for me, there's this really interesting invitation to humanity in that you may be part of our function as human beings really should be to show up for each other in this way and to invite this capacity to really be with each other with the
Mm-hmm.
full spectrum of your being and my being.
Mm-hmm. I'm so a lot comes up. I feel like as if there's something more that wants to be said from
No,
you.
well, on that tone, on that note, it's just it's a little bit of like I can't say it's like an itch for me when I hear that distinction
Yeah.
uh, about this like territory between therapy and a space, and um,
Mm-hmm.
I just because I just feel like it's so important for me. It's just so important this deepening
Mm-hmm.
of real humanity in every context of life, not just in, oh, this is therapy, this is family, this is work.
Yes. And at the same time, it's when I hear that as a reflection sometimes from participants, it
Mm,
tells me how much maybe they come from a context where they are used to serving a certain role and not having the opportunity to bring their emotional lives into the work that they do, so to say. How much there is a
mm,
distinction between where can I be with all my struggles and feelings, etc., and how a separate container is developed for that, so to say. And I fully agree with you. In the work that I do, I don't make up that distinction. And at the same time, I'm conscious it might bring some challenges if people who are totally not used to
mm,
such an invitation, it can also flood the space and overwhelm
mm,
the space
mm,
that a group can hold. So for me, you asked me about how I design these spaces, kind of
mm,
both have a facilitator heart, so to say. And I would say there is no recipe, so to say, that I have for that. But every time the like, let's assume I'm running a three day retreat for a certain group. Um, the first few hours for me are about sensing the field and finding out what is possible for this group and what does the group feel comfortable with, so to say. And I may have I may have a plan or an anticipation for the process flow, so to say, because always there is some also strategic need that the group needs to respond to, etc. But at the same time, I need to be able to sense how deep can the group go while be staying coherent with each other, so to say. And I feel it takes 2 hours for me and for the whole group to find out what is a good relationship culture here with each other. And I can clearly observe how with different groups, they navigate a healthy relationship culture differently in those first few hours. Some groups, and that's not only influenced by cultural background, but also, but some groups need a lot of time in small constellation, moments of intimacy, so to say, so that the participants feel, oh, I can open up, I can engage in real relationship and presence, etc. While other groups need a lot of time in the whole group in a circle to feel safe enough, so to say. And how to dance between kind of practical work, like what can we do and do we want to do, and etc., more the inner work on reflection and personality, etc., and the conceptual work, like where are questions that we really need to talk about on the abstract level, how to find a way so that people feel comfortable moving between these. That defines the first few hours. And I need to offer the group a process to find into that field mode with each other. And in a way, you could say, once the group has found a lively relationship culture with each other, most of the things afterwards, of course, I provide containers and guidance, etc., but they do it by themselves. But my main work is helping, and you could say an assembly of 20 to 50 or whatever individuals forming a temporary field for these 3 days. And this forming the field in a way that you feel everyone can somehow flow with each other. And we define, it's not something that I predefine, what is okay, what is not okay here, where are the movable boundaries of this space, but the group has to find it together under my guidance.
It's like learning how we're going to be together.
Exactly.
And what does that process look like?
Let me just give you one simple example how I often do that in the beginning. It needs a purpose why this group is coming together. And in the beginning, it needs someone who has a certain authority also in the group, like the person who invited, so to say, to restate that purpose. The purpose may have been iterated in beforehand, etc., but it needs to be brought into the space. Why are we actually here?
Is that, just to clarify, is that you usually, or is that a different person? Who are you facilitating and someone else hasn't created the invitation, or are you both?
Usually let's say it's a strategy retreat of an organization. Then the person with the whatever form of leadership authority of that organization is saying, why do we come together here? And then giving the kind of the process into my hands. And I let the group, then I guide them through a getting to know process, so to say. I say, okay, we're here to respond to that kind of purpose or work on something together. It depends. Some people feel very much pressure to do something. Others are just here to have a good time. Let's see. I offer them 2 hours of getting to know. The beginning is usually 3 rounds of a walking check-in. And what I just invite people to do is don't do a circle of introductions, because after a circle of introductions, everyone is tired. So you just cannot memorize so many people. People are feeling that I have to squeeze my profile into a 1.5 minute pitch, so to say. It's an atmosphere of squeeze. And I just say, okay, we're doing it differently here. Trust me, for the next 1.5 hours, a little bit, we're doing it more playfully. So let's just walk around a little bit. And we walk around, and in silence, we just look at each other. Who's here? Take a look. Where are you? How's the place? And greet each other by the eye without talking. And then I bring people into a first random encounter, 3 people talking about, how was your trip here? How did you get here? How was your experience of arriving? Some conversation, a little bit hearing from everyone. Okay, next round. We continue walking around. Next round is a bit something about more like, remember the moment when you received the invitation. What was it? Why did you feel this is how I want to spend 3 days of my life? And a third round, it could be something, it totally depends on what is the what is the frame of the conference. Could be something guiding you into the content. It doesn't matter so much. What is important is 3 random encounters and then intimate moments with people you have never spoken with, and people make the experience, oh, I can have a real human connection with basically anyone here in the room.
Mm.
You move between intimacy and hearing from everyone, and then going back into a new random intimacy and then hearing from everyone. It creates an atmosphere where you feel, oh, I am heard. I'm experiencing the resonance that the small group conversation brings in, and it establishes a little bit of a listening culture. Usually at the 3rd round, when I do the popcorn with everyone, I don't ask them to share what they shared, but what have you heard from others that inspired you? Mm-hmm. Or in your group of 3, what did you perceive as that's a shared reason among us, or that is someone that we converge towards? So the exact questions are not so important, but it's more about that experience of intimacy, field hearing, intimacy, field hearing. And then the second half of these 1.5 hours, I usually do a sequence of constellations, just different questions for the group to get an overview. What perspectives are here? Who is here? I compile together with the organizers a set of up to 6 questions, and people position themselves in the room with respect to those questions. The simplest one being like, from where did you travel here? Yeah, and then you position yourself north, south, east, west, etc. And you can briefly in the group talk about who's here, who's not here, who's missing. Or you could
do that as a whole group or in small groups.
Mm. The whole group, mm-hmm. Because it helps visualize. Maybe there's one big group, and they know each other already. Yeah. And maybe there's one person totally alone, and you can go around and just bring it into the room. Oh, there is a big chunk of people who know each other, because it shapes the atmosphere of a group. Mm. And then you could briefly speak with them. How do you?
So these are particular kinds of questions that can be answered in a kind of a spatial way.
Yes. Mm. For example, I also sometimes ask, imagine a triangle in the room. Yeah. Knowledge, self-experience, and new relationships. What do you feel is going to be most important, or are you most attracted to during these 3 days? Mm-hmm. And then I ask them to walk around and reflect, like, okay, how important is this for you? What does it trigger you? People position themselves, and you have a few voices from each cluster. Mm. And what it does to the group is you acknowledge that there is no agreement on what is important here. Mm-hmm. But you visualize, and also I as a facilitator get a sense, are people more interested in the emotional work, or are they really here for discussing content? Or is it just about socializing, so to say? And I could just make it visible. We are not responding to any of that. We are not kind of finding answers to it, but I'm making visible to the group, some are here for this, some are here for that. And it's fine. That's just, we create a container where all that can be. Mm-hmm. Recently, very spontaneously, I did something at some point, because it was a very scientific group. And I asked, okay, imagine this is a spectrum. Are you the person you feel, when I want to talk to someone, I would go to you and just talk at you, then go to that end? Or are you more the person like, I'm rather holding back. I'm happy if someone approaches me. Yeah. You could say, where are you on the introvert or extrovert end of the spectrum, so to say? And half of the group was going very clearly to the introvert spectrum. And that was such a shift to the group for them to realize, I'm not the only introvert here. Mm-hmm. The simplest of that can be, you say something, okay, we have 50 people here. You've been doing these rounds of looking at everyone's eyes. What do you estimate? How many people did you know personally before this day? And half of the group is positioned between 0 and 3. It clears the air. Everyone knows, okay, I'm not the only one not knowing anyone. Mm. And then you, just by hearing a few voices, it brings that relief of, this difference is here and it's okay, and I'm recognized in my difference.
Mm.
And let me add two more things. At the very end of this, I say, okay, now I have a request to you. We are going to work for 3 days, and it's so important for me to know your names. I know we are 50 people, it's challenging, but I would like to ask you for your help learning your names. Trust me, it's going to be very quick. We do a circle. Left of me, we start with A. Right of me, it's Z. And now find your place. People arrange each other, and then we do a brief circle going through the names. And for me, it's very important that I learn the names. It takes only 5 to 10 minutes. I go through it in a circle 3 times, once in silence, then everyone together. But it is such an appreciation for the group to know, okay, I am here recognized with my name, so to say. Mm. And I don't have to look at your chest whenever I meet you, I usually don't have name tags. And the whole group is for the first time in a circle, and every voice is heard. And when I then do a very final round, just, okay, briefly, at the end of this is the group with which you will be working for the next 3 days. How do you feel here? And I just ask a few voices to speak up. The atmosphere has completely changed. It's always this, like, from strangers to friends, or like, wow, what a cool, diverse group. There are so many people I want to talk with. Mm-hmm. And I have interrupted so many conversations, when they were just beginning to become interesting. But it brings that playful curiosity and at the same time safety in the diversity into the room. That's what I care about the most. And then you can say, where do we go from here? But for me, the groundwork is laid in those for 2 hours.
Mm. Yeah, I love the spatial activity. I just participated in a process like this recently, where it was an event where we all likely had we sensed we all had very similar orientations to the world, and then I forget the question, but it was about politics, and we basically we were invited to spread first across a vertical axis in terms of some sort of like political orientation, and then a horizontal one. And at the end of the activity, people were all across the spectrum. And it was just so interesting, because you would imagine, here we are, it was a summit on feminine intelligence, right? So very kind of like relational, heart-centered human beings. And yet here we are with this political question, and there's almost like 100% diversity in terms of orientation, and it was a really powerful activity. I wonder about have you tried to approach this? So I'll back up a minute. One way that I describe this process is to surface. I call it surfacing what's unspoken but communicated anyway. Surface what's unspoken but communicated anyway. And this is particularly true with power dynamics and things like that in the space, but all of this stuff in one way or another, whether it's like relationship clusters, or distance people traveled, or political orientation, it's all in the space. It's communicated, but it's not spoken. And so I find, for me, this is in some ways the whole process of a group journey is surfacing more and more relevantly what's in the space of awareness, so that it becomes visible. So I'm curious, in terms of the spatial activity, if you've approached anything like that on a Zoom context or a virtual context.
I have, but I admit it's much more challenging. I'm not a fan of it, but that's maybe just my personal preference. I have done these kinds of constellations also with a group who was rather familiar with each other in an online space. We basically moved our little avatars on a Miro board. And I provided different maps on the Miro board. And it was so insightful for the group, because I asked, I have many things parallel here, because I just mentioned the spatial activities that are in the beginning of the process to just give the group a sense for the diversity that wants to be explored. But of course, you can do these spatial activities also to deepen certain questions and really explore them and then do proper constellations, so to say. But that's more something in the middle of the process.
Mm.
But I did it online with a map. I asked people like two questions that were particularly impactful. One was, which role are you usually taking in transformation processes? And then I used a frame from the two-loop model of the Birkener Institute. Maybe you're familiar with it. It's kind of in the older structures, constructor, preserve, conflict solver, hospice. And in the new structure, pioneer, facilitator, lighthouse, bridge builder. Different roles in transformation processes, so to say. And I asked people to position themselves. What role are you usually serving? And it brought up an interesting tension. Like there was a big chunk of pioneers and facilitators, but there were also conflict solvers or conservatives, conservation. I don't know what the proper English word is, yeah, but those who conserve existing structures. And then I asked them, okay, and now with which role do you usually experience the highest tensions when working with them? And people moved around, yeah? And it sparked a conversation in which is not shaped by this is the best role or that is the good role or whatever, but it starts from the appreciation like we have different foci in this group. And it needs the pioneers, but the pioneers have also their blind spots, so to say, that some of the bridge builders can help with. And this role is insufficient without that role, so to say, yeah? And it helped the whole group that was, until then, honestly, quite stuck in arguing either or, what's better, what's worse, what's the right way forward, acknowledging the right way for you in your role, dealing primarily with these people, is different to how I can respond to my context in my role to these people. So that was possible online. That was very cool. And something similar, like in which sphere or domain of society are you mostly embedded with? Is it like arts and culture? Is it business? Is it politics? Is it technology? Yeah. And seeing what diversity the group has internally and then see, oh, what perspective are you most curious about? Or where do you suspect the highest transformative potential for this group? You know, it starts from an appreciation of difference and invites the curiosity about the complementarity. So that was possible online, but it also depends on where people start from, you know, what do people need to feel safe? A lot of people, it depends on the age group, etc., can very comfortably engage in online spaces, while in others, you need to contain certain personality profiles, let's call it that way, in a way that is challenging online. In what I described earlier, and it's so fascinating how people before the event warn me, like, oh, you need to be so careful about this and that person. He's super dominant and super lecturing and whatever. Yeah. At the end of this playful mode, that they all make the experience, oh, I get to speak and people get to this, but it's embedded in something where everyone listens to everyone. It never became a problem. And at some point, the organizers come to me, I don't know. What's happening? He's not exploding. What's happening? Yeah. I believe something can happen in these personal encounters that is much more challenging to be experienced online. But yeah, you're facilitating more online. I'm sure you have your own experiences. Maybe you have ways to be present online as a facilitator that make that possible. I
find it's different in every context with every group of people, and my general approach tends to be to prototype and remain receptive to what's emerging in a space, and to really kind of be in concert with that. I'm curious about, so in the context of what you're talking about, you're are people participating in the experience for a transformational process, or are they participating to have kind of like a conversational, collaborative outcome, or maybe both?
That really varies. So I would say my work is someone with a certain leadership responsibility approaches me and asks for help. And I find out what is the purpose and the need for the group that this person is responsible for. And that is a process in itself, the whole preparation. And I cannot generalize, and interestingly, often the people believe they come for this, but in the process and halfway, they realize what we really need is this and that. So, and I love to play with that. And that's why it needs those first few hours. And after this introduction that I explained to you, I always do a storytelling and listening exercise where you, like an appreciative inquiry, so to say, where people make the experience, I can speak for 7 minutes and then someone is mirroring to another one what he or she heard. For people, it's the first time that they say, oh, usually I speak and I experience that nobody's listening to me. So and after that, they realize, oh, actually, I don't need to talk about all that stuff here. What I really would like is, but that's not why they come. They believe they come for something else. And then I have to give the group the space to find out what is it where the energy really wants to go. Having said that, some are like often the groups are really coming for a specific, you could say, outer need, a problem that they face. And they feel I just want to respond more effectively to that problem.
Can you give me a specific example?
Let's say a sustainability manager in a big company. He has very specific challenges and he's worried and he feels a high degree of responsibility because he knows his company is really responsible for a lot of pollution, atmospheric impact, what have you not. And he feels overwhelmed and says, but I have this opportunity in this company to do something, but how do I do that? Yeah. They may believe they just need the right strategy or the best coaching, how to convince their CEO, blah, blah, blah. And after a day, they realize, oh, but what I really need is this sense of community, like people who share my sense of struggle, and then see what is to relax into what is possible for me and accept what I cannot change, but trust that in the complementarity of our different efforts, something new is happening, so to say. Maybe it's not about convincing my CEO. Maybe it is about creating some structures under my own leadership that enable me to be transformative in my company while I cannot change the company. There are often people believe I have a clear plan. I just need people to run with me. And at the end of the first day, they say, okay, I understand it doesn't work like that. Damn it. I don't know what next. And then it needs the creative day in the middle to form new resonances and alliances and see that's where the creativity really comes. And I cannot foresee kind of what that wants to be. But I want to pick up one point that you mentioned. Of course, I prefer if people come also with the explicit openness to engage in, let's say, personal work. But I cannot assume that in the most cases, I would say. And there's different layers of that. When I design an event by myself, that is a given, so to say. But often I find joy in facilitating for groups that don't have that on their radar and discover halfway through that that's where the music plays, so to say.
Do you create a container for that explicitly up front in terms of just at the onset, maybe? And I'm curious a little more about that 2-3 hour period we talked about at the beginning, whether it also involves certain words towards the possible intimacy that might emerge, or an
Yeah.
invitation to deeper levels of connection?
Um, so I would say, and I wasn't aware of that until a year ago, but I have realized that a lot of that is created through my own presence,
Mm-hmm.
just through the way how I choose to show up, not only as kind of the expert, the physicist, the research group leader, talala, yeah, but as the human being. And I in the in between spaces of my moderation, so to say, I include some personal reflections or an awareness of my how a certain sustainability topic might also personally touch me and bring me into
Mm-hmm.
some, yeah. Just by owning that and not hiding that, I feel I invite that into the small group conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But often enough, towards the end of that, I also, like I said, with that triangle, I ask, how much are you leaning to this or that? And sometimes the group also not splits, but segregates into different foci. And it's quite rich if a group says, oh, I want to go deeper into that personal work. And then I give them a container to go deeper in that, maybe
Mm-hmm.
also facilitated by someone, while another group wants to work on a technical topic. And then later, I remingle them or I reshuffle them, and they listen to each other, because I don't want to push, let's say, a classical engineer, yeah, to engage in questions about his spiritual crisis related to climate change, yeah. Why should I? Yeah, I feel I can leave him or her in his focus, and at the same time, I feel it's important that he feels. For some people, that is really where a certain depth is happening, and if they only listen to each other and enrich each other, I trust what is happening then with that. But often enough, I'm worried that this is split, and kind of people with a more psychological or spiritual orientation are finger pointing to kind of the technocrats, yeah, and all the more technical people are rolling their eyes as soon as the word emotion is in the room or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I do create a certain container, but most of it is created by the group itself, simply by the way how they have conversations with each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, by inviting in the beginning, like this, how was your journey here? What did you experience so far? Some people share something. It's human, you know, it's alive, it's loaded with emotion and experience, you know. Or I ask a question like, we are addressing this and that topic. Um, how do you feel coming here? Do you feel full of energy and hope? Yeah. Or do you feel more, actually, I'm so exhausted and close to despair? The doesn't need to talk about it immediately, but just highlighting and giving people the opportunity to see this is something that is in the room, is something that people pick up in the small group conversations if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do you offer any guidance on um, how someone might listen, or what they might notice, or
yeah,
bringing awareness to their body, or anything like that? Because part of what I'm hearing and really appreciating in what you're sharing is the implicit nature. Because in some, I've been in a broad spectrum of experiences where sometimes it's so explicit, it's almost too much. It's like this like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
explicit invitation about how you should be and how open and all that, and that can be like
yeah,
suffocating even for the most like open person. and
yeah,
and and then but then there is a certain elegance to creating a space where it's just implicit, and in that case it really does often
yeah.
emerge from the modeling of the convener. And then there's some maybe territories in between where there can be a like an invitation or some guidance on a particular way of being with each other. And I wonder where you navigate that.
Um, so yes, I do very clearly. It depends a little bit on um, how much time we have. Yeah, am I the only facilitator? Does the group need to stay together, etc.? But for example, I said in this listening exercise that comes after the introduction, I almost always do that. Because for that, I give them very clear instructions. They say, yes, it may feel micromanaged at first, but trust me, after the first round, you will experience that it does make sense to stick to these, to this guidance, so to say. So I cannot influence, of course, whether someone who is listening in the appreciative inquiry is listening with a real open heart and presence. Yeah, I have no influence on that. I usually demonstrate briefly, like, okay, what kind of listening are we talking about here? It's a listening where I invite you to really just receive and not judge. Yeah, you're listening, you're not interrupting. If the storyteller wants to have a moment of pause or thinking, just stay receptive and open. And afterwards, when you turn to the third person and you only say, what have I heard? And what has it stimulated in me, so to say? The experience of not judging what was said, but just listening and mirroring is doing something to the collective atmosphere. It's not so important for me that they go super deep on this first day. For me, it's more about showing the direction. This is the kind of culture that where we go, and helping the more dominant persons, for example, make the experience, oh, it's so precious to hear what others are hearing when they listen to me. This kind of dynamic, so to say. That's kind of an instruction that I give. And then often I like afterwards to do such a practice with the whole group where one person is really like collectively listened to. And then I'm really facilitating and giving very clear instructions to, okay, let's have a group that listens, so to say, to the word. And we have another group, people who would like to more like observe their bodies while they're listening to the stories. Maybe some of you would like to observe your free associations. And you can choose, where do you feel, are you drawn, so to say? What is your preferred channel of perception? And I facilitate it in a way that I invite all those voices bit by bit afterwards when we reflect back to the storyteller. And all of that still on the first day. So that's to the end of the first day. All of that, as when people feel, oh, all that is okay. Yeah. For me, it's not important that each of those channels reaches the depth that it could potentially reach. For me, it's more important that the different channels are danced with simultaneously, so to say. And that when someone feels here, emotion is present, feels comfortable bringing it in. When someone feels this is something that's really triggering cognitive insights for me, it is also okay to bring it in the same conversation. I feel that is most alive to me, so to say. But in other contexts, of course, it makes sense to say now we are only focusing on an exploration of the emotional dimension of this and that, so to say. It's not my focus usually. I prefer to give people the space. Say, you're a group anyway, it's okay. You are more cognitive, you're more emotional, you're more this, yeah. But create a container that is so appreciative in terms of listening, it can all be in dance with each other.
Yeah, one of the things that's coming through for me right now is just I think the theme of visibility from the many dimensions of the activity of the whole journey, from the spatial activities to the recognizing of different orientations, whether you're more mental or more emotional, or however you might approach something more analytical, or to what is actually present for you, and creating a space that allows that to be shared safely. To me, if I had to somehow capture all of it in one word, it would be about visibility. That it is the gradual kind of coming into visibility of all the elements that are present and relevant, that creates what does it create?
My word is aliveness while you're speaking.
That's exactly the word I had earlier. There's something, but I guess the question would be, I mean, you know, why. It's almost by becoming present to and aware of what's really in the space that we, you know, without the reservation of judgment or self-consciousness or shame, that all of those elements can actually become a source of aliveness and connection. And it's actually also, I think this is where it all lands in the space of presence, is that when I can become present to you and more of you, and you can become present to me and more of me, there's that natural aliveness. And in a group space, that aliveness takes on a whole new connotation of creativity and insight and possibility. And then that almost like reinforces the aliveness of the space. But there's something about the making visible, you know, the making okay, there's so many dimensions to why things are not visible. You know, it's not all about like you know, I feel shame or I'm afraid, but those are certainly, you know, fear and shame are elements, but or just something maybe obscured, or you know, somehow obscured under complexity, or just, you know, it's so obvious people don't even recognize it. And so there's something about the making consciously visible for all of us to see that then I feel opens up this aliveness and possibility.
A lot is going on in me as I listen to you, Lawrence. So this term visibility is interesting to me. Partly because I work a lot with Chinese groups in the last few years. And I have experienced how much can be processed by a group in the invisible. And that is amazing. It's amazing. We don't have the space here to explore that fully. But so there is one voice in me that goes immediately with you. And I feel, yes, there's it's so precious to help a group make it visible. Yeah. Also as a reflection to then work with it together and as a source of aliveness, so to say. And at the same time, I have, to my own surprise, experienced how there can be a guidance that brings something into the presence, but somehow it's not visible. It's not even spoken about. But it happens. And I hope that one day I will have proper words for what's going on there, because it's honestly also challenging me as a facilitator, like to say, okay, is it really present, or is that my projection? Am I sensing something here, or what is it? How can I read the field? How can I read what's going on in the field? It's always influenced by my sensitivity. And my sensitivity might be geared towards what is visible. And through my work with Chinese, also co-facilitating with a Chinese, my own sensitivity is developing, and I notice, oh, something is happening here. It's effective for the group. But I would say maybe I call it invisible.
But when you use the word visible and invisible, I'm curious, would you say if you sense something, I mean, I guess it all opens up this question of what is visibility?
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if are you saying that I'm curious about this question of invisibility, and I'm also curious that if something is sensed but maybe not named, is that invisible? Because I would still say, at least for me in my orientation, if I sense something, it's certainly visible. I might then name it, and then it becomes more visible. But I find I would almost say that, and again, I'm not entirely. I want to just acknowledge that I may not entirely be clear on the question of invisibility, but I would almost be inclined to say that it is the sensing of things that are invisible that offers the true visibility.
And it adds a layer to me. Somehow my association when you said visible means to me that it can be perceived by everyone in the room.
Mm. Mm.
Um,
And does that include if it? Hmm. So when you say invisible, does that mean that it's something that you sense that maybe others don't, or what is the?
I want to give you an
What
example.
is it if something is
Yeah.
invisible but you are aware of it?
Yeah,
So what is that awareness? How is that awareness um, uh,
exactly.
expressed?
I want to give you an example from one of the events that I was running last year. Um, in the middle of that process, it was a strategy retreat of very technical scientists. And in the middle of the process, someone came to me and said, I feel this space is so full of love. And I said, isn't it? And she said, so it's not only me. He said, yes, I'm sensing it too. I would never speak it up to the group. I would never make it so to say visible as a reflection to the
Mm,
whole group, because in
mm,
that
mm,
moment, I would, I might, you could say, push it into the visibility so that everyone looks at it, so to say.
mm, mm,
Sure, even if people cannot verbalize it, they share a certain experience of
mm,
something in the aliveness of that process.
mm,
And for some people, that may surface as something they express to me as there is love here. Yeah.
mm,
And I feel beautiful. It's not important. Is it love? Is it not love? Do we call it this way? Is it? Yeah. But I feel it is there anyway.
mm.
And in that sense, I would say it stays invisible.
I think this is a really, really, really key distinction that I'm surprised actually hasn't emerged earlier, but maybe is emerging right now, which is the distinction between visibility and presence.
Hmm.
Being present to something, in that context, I feel that everyone in a group space can be present to the experience of love, and it can almost be not necessarily articulated, but felt and acknowledged in the way that people look at each other, respond to each other, and it's almost like this like secret handshake, this like knowing of like like yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we're feeling it, whatever
Yeah.
it is, right? So they're present to it, versus visible, which has this connotation that it's being named. And it's an interesting territory because you could, as a facilitator, then make it visible and say, notice the experience of love.
See, that's a beautiful point. Somehow my sense says we are probably approaching the end of our time already,
We are
but
approaching the end of our time, but
let's
that's okay. This is a great,
and put the
great
let's.
conclusion end.
Um, this is beautiful. I know we meet again and can continue this conversation, but I often leave it to the group what wants to become visible. I don't decide for the group, so to say, what wants to become visible. And I want to share one more short episode that for me where visibility was precious for the group. It was again a person that everyone had warned me about beforehand and said, "Oh, very worried." I wasn't the old white man, so to say. And at the end of the first day, when I made a circle, okay, at the end of this first day, could you summarize in a word what's alive for you? How do you feel in this the end of the first day? And this old guy, it burst out of him. He said, invigorated. I said, no, 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 no. I cannot summarize this in one word. Blah, blah, blah. And then he said like 2 or 3 sentences. And then he said, I want to say, if you had told me what this is becoming, I would never have come. But it is so cool to really speak with people about what I don't understand and what is really so difficult that I always awake alone at night, blah, blah, blah. It bubbled out of him and he was full of this joy. Yeah. But most people had experienced him before as the critical expert. Everyone's worried. What might he say? You know, through him, he made the joy visible to everyone, the playfulness that is, and it was full of, yeah, joyful. He didn't have to say anything about love. The whole group didn't need to, yeah. But he embodied that joy representative for the whole group. And because it came from him, who had a certain also power energy, so to say, in the room, the whole room changed. And it shaped the whole remaining 2 days. Yeah. It was amazing. It was so beautiful. And in that sense, the visibility can be super precious, but it's important for me that it comes from the group. I, as the facilitator, am the mirror to the group. And I'm surprised sometimes how deep a group wants to go. And then suddenly something surfaces and they want to play with it, etc. And sometimes it doesn't. And it's not important, for the aliveness of the process, how much of the depth becomes visible, so to say. But this is an open end that we create here.
I love it. I mean, yeah, and this gets into like these subtle nuances of, as a facilitator, what you make visible, or how you somehow are contribute to creating the conditions for something to become visible from the group. And of course, when it happens that way through a person, I'm always so grateful and personally deeply touched when there's a person that somehow, through this deep explosion of authenticity, just like and the space like has this incredible resonance for this person's expression. Yeah, those are like the moments of joy and beauty for me that I in a group space. Thomas, thank you. This has been a really rich, enlivening, joyful conversation. I feel like we could go on for another 3 hours.
We will.
To be continued. I feel so much love and gratitude for our relationship.
Thank you so much for creating space where we could have this conversation, Lawrence, because I also feel it creates a soil for us to build on the next time we connect.
Absolutely.
It feels so precious and rich what you are enabling through that summit that you're organizing. Thank you for including me in that.
Thank you.